On June 29, 1941, in Port of Spain, Trinidad, a boy was born who would one day shake empires. A boy who would grow into the voice that shouted Black power so loudly the world still echoes with it. His birth name was Stokely Carmichael. History remembers him as Kwame Ture, a revolutionary who refused silence, refused fear, and refused to bow to any system that fed on oppression. From Trinidad to Harlem, from the front lines of the civil rights movement, to the heart of Pan-African liberation in Guinea, his life became a blueprint for global resistance. And today, the movement he helped build, the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, still stands, still organizes, and still calls on anyone who believes in freedom to join the struggle. If you value truth, consciousness, and stories that challenge the world as it is, like, share, and subscribe. It helps this message reach more people, and trust me, it needs to. Kwame Ture entered the world as Stokely Standiford Churchill Carmichael on June 29, 1941, in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, a British colony still shaped by plantations, empire, and the long shadow of slavery. His childhood was ordinary in ways, but the world he was born into was not. It was a world where Black people were expected to know their place, and a world he would spend his entire life fighting to transform. At just 11 years old, Stokely left Trinidad and joined his parents in the Bronx, New York. If Trinidad taught him rhythm, community, and pride, America introduced him to the brutal architecture of Northern racism. The Bronx of the 1950s was a place of crowded apartments, working-class struggle, and a daily collision between hope and hardship. But it was also a political classroom, a place where a young immigrant boy saw, for the first time, how injustice was not random, it was structured. By the late 1950s, Stokely had begun to carve out his own place in the rising tide of the Black freedom struggle. At Howard University, he immersed himself in history and revolutionary theory, reading W.B. Du Bois, Frantz Fanon, Karl Marx, and the writings of Kwame Nkrumah. These weren't just books to him. They were weapons, blueprints, roadmaps. He joined the Nonviolent Action Group, a student collective challenging segregation in the nation's capital. Even here, his brilliance was unmistakable. Professors whispered that this young man was built for revolution. Students followed him, inspired by his clarity, his courage, and his burning sense of justice. The Civil Rights years, 1960 to 1966. In 1961, he joined the Freedom Rides, a campaign so dangerous even seasoned activists hesitated. Stokely didn't hesitate. He boarded the buses, knowing exactly what waited for him on southern roads, mobs, arrests, and the possibility of death. He was arrested again and again, beaten, thrown into Mississippi's most notorious jails, locked in cells where the state tried to crush spirits and break bodies. But the opposite happened. In jail, he met Black sharecroppers, men and women who lived closer to the edge of despair than most could imagine, yet carried themselves with a dignity that humbled him. He said these workers taught him more about courage and resistance than any classroom ever could. By the mid-1960s, he was deep inside the movement's beating heart, SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He went door to door across the Deep South, organizing voter registration in counties where Black people risked their lives simply by signing their names. Every phone call could be tapped. Every marcher could be killed. Every meeting could bring the Klan. This is where Carmichael and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spent time together, two brilliant minds, two giant hearts, two visions of liberation. They respected each other profoundly, but their paths were beginning to diverge. King held firm to nonviolence as both a tactic and a moral philosophy. Carmichael could no longer ignore the repeated reality. Black blood was being spilled across the South, and the American state responded with more violence, not justice. He began to ask a dangerous question. How long can we allow ourselves to be beaten before we defend our lives? It was a question America refused to hear until 1966 forced them to. During the March Against Fear, as the sun burned the Mississippi asphalt and the air hung heavy with tension, Stokely Carmichael took the microphone. He had just been arrested, again, for doing nothing more than walking while Black. Something inside him snapped. Or perhaps something long inside him finally escaped. He stepped forward, eyes burning, shoulders squared, surrounded by people who had been terrorized for generations. And he shouted, "We want black power." The world cracked open. The crowd erupted, a roar of decades of pain and pride exploding into the air. America froze. News cameras rolled. The FBI's phones lit up like a Christmas tree. Politicians panicked, whispering behind closed doors that Carmichael might become the next Malcolm X, a revolutionary voice with the power to unite millions. And they were right to be afraid. Because in that moment, Stokely Carmichael didn't just speak a slogan. He ignited a movement that would redefine what it meant to be black in America. A movement that refused shame, refused fear, and refused to ask politely for rights people had already died for. And in many ways, he did become what they feared. A global revolutionary voice America could not silence, could not contain, and could not stop. After the cry for black power electrified the nation in 1966, Stokely Carmichael became more than an activist. He became a symbol, a signal, a threat to the American racial order. And with that power came transformation, for himself and for the movement. When Carmichael took leadership of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, in 1966, it was at a crossroads. SNCC had once been the purest engine of nonviolent protest, sit-ins, voter registration, and interracial cooperation. But after years of bombings, beatings, assassinations, and broken federal promises, many young organizers felt that integration was becoming a political trap, a demand that black people assimilate into systems designed to destroy them. Carmichael articulated what others whispered: "We cannot integrate into a burning house." Under his leadership, SNCC shifted dramatically. They began questioning capitalism openly. They demanded black self-determination, not white approval. They aligned themselves with anti-colonial struggles worldwide: Vietnam, Cuba, Algeria, Ghana. They challenged the idea that freedom required pleasing white liberals. They insisted that black communities must control their own land, politics, and power. This shift terrified Washington. The FBI labeled him a national security threat under COINTLPRO, a program designed to neutralize black radicals. Agents followed him, tapped his phones, and infiltrated meetings. His rise was meteoric, and that made him dangerous. By 1967, Carmichael was one of the most recognizable black leaders in the world. He was charismatic, brilliant, and unafraid to call out U.S. hypocrisy. J. Edgar Hoover, an American law enforcement administrator who served as the fifth and final director of the Bureau of Investigation, BOI, and the first director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, wrote privately that Carmichael could become the most dangerous Negro of the future. But because he was young, because he was loved, because he could unite black America the way Malcolm X once had. And just like Malcolm, the state feared what he could become. In 1968, something extraordinary happened. Stokely Carmichael married Miriam Makeba, the world-famous South African singer known as Mama Africa, a woman whose voice carried the pain and dignity of a continent. Makeba wasn't just a singer. She was an anti-apartheid freedom fighter, a global cultural icon, a United Nations speaker, a political exile whose South African citizenship had been revoked for speaking against white rule. She had been banned from her homeland for singing truth. Carmichael had been targeted in his homeland for doing the same. Their marriage was more than romance. It was a political earthquake. Two exiles, two rebels, two world-traveling symbols of African resistance. Their union represented the thing Carmichael believed in most fiercely: the unity of African people everywhere, on the continent and across the diaspora. White newspapers mocked the marriage. U.S. politicians panicked. Hollywood blacklisted Makeba. And Singapore intensified surveillance on both of them. But it didn't stop them. It only confirmed what they already knew: the struggle was global. By 1969, the noose was tightening. Carmichael couldn't hold a meeting without undercover agents nearby. He couldn't make a phone call without the FBI listening. His passport was threatened. His job opportunities evaporated. Universities shut their doors to him. Police followed him from city to city. He later said, "Everywhere I went, the enemy was already waiting." So when two giants of African liberation, President Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea and Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, invited him to support the African Revolution on the continent, he accepted. He left the United States, not in retreat, but in strategic escalation. And he said, "I did not leave America. America left me." In Guinea, he shed the name Stokely Carmichael, a name given by empire, and took on a new one, Kwame Ture. Kwame, for Osajyefo, Kwame Nkrumah, the philosopher king of African Revolution. Toure, for Ahmed Sékou Touré, the president who declared he would rather live in poverty than under French colonialism. His renaming was not symbolic, it was political. He declared, "I am no longer an American problem. I am an African revolutionary." In Guinea, Kwame Ture became a full-time organizer for the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, A-APRP, the organization he helped build into a global Pan-African engine. He traveled the world, delivering over 300 speeches a year, spreading a message that was as sharp as it was prophetic. The African Revolution is global, or it is nothing. He taught that Africa must unite politically. Capitalism must be dismantled. Black people worldwide share a common destiny. Socialism is the only path to human dignity. Liberation must be international, not national. His voice carried from Guinea to London, from Jamaica to Tanzania, from university classrooms to crowded streets. Even decades after leaving the US, his influence terrified the powerful. The CIA never stopped monitoring him. The FBI kept files open until the day he died. Kwame Ture in exile was more dangerous than Stokely Carmichael in America. In 1996, Kwame Ture announced he had prostate cancer, but he did not say it softly. He declared publicly, "The CIA has been trying to kill me for years. They have finally succeeded. They have infected me with cancer." Whether one believes his claim or not, the suspicion was not paranoid. The US government had targeted black radicals for decades, tested chemicals on political prisoners, infiltrated and destroyed black organizations, assassinated leaders globally. Kwame Ture continued organizing from his hospital bed. He held meetings between chemotherapy sessions. He never stopped preaching Pan-African unity. On November 15, 1998, in Conakry, Guinea, Kwame Ture passed away at 57 years old. He left this world as he lived, an unbroken revolutionary. Today, Kwame Ture remains a father of modern Pan-Africanism, the voice that crystallized black power, a strategist whose ideas shaped global liberation movements, a revolutionary whose courage challenged empire itself. But his most living legacy is this: the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, the A-APRP. The organization he helped build is still active, still organizing, still recruiting, and still fighting for the world he envisioned. Kwame Ture used to end every speech with the words, "The struggle continues. Victory is certain." But today, as we carry forward his spirit, we say, one day, the struggle will end, and victory will belong to the people. And if you feel moved by his life, if you feel the fire of global African unity, if you believe in liberation as a human right, know this: you can join the movement. The All-African People's Revolutionary Party is still here, still building, still educating, still fighting. Just search A-APRP on Google and find a chapter near you to join the work Kwame Ture dedicated his life to. If you found this video powerful, inspiring, or helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It helps spread political education, and it keeps this kind of truth alive. And remember, organize, resist, and be unbreakable.